This is an inside joke, and I'm happy to explain it, but yeah.
Yeah. So this is Dan, by the way.
Hi.
Give him some love.
I can't believe they let me back in for a fourth time in a row. Can you believe it? Maybe. All right, let's see if it's going to behave now. Does it do the thing? Yeah. So I get these sweet animated backgrounds.
Nice. Okay, help me in one more round of applause for Dan, who's our first speaker today. Dan, we're really pleased to have you.
Thank you so much. Yay. And first, let me thank everybody who managed to drag themselves out of bed after the party to come here to be here at 9 a.m. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. So I'm Dan. On the internet, I'm this because there's a million Dans. And today, I'm going to teach you how old people like me did stuff before the cloud. Come on, why is this thing doing that thing? That's weird. Why? Of course, fantastic. I don't know why it's doing these things, but cool. Anyway, so briefly, I am one of two founders of a tiny company called Phobos Group. For a long time, we did like boutique red team stuff, like sneaking in, breaking in, hiding from the blue team, making Hollywood-style effects happen inside of a company for the sake of the people that don't care about security and they need the theatrics to understand stuff. And so lately we've gone to more of a sort of engineering kind of role where people ask us to solve weird security engineering problems, everything from architecture to like adversarial, like I've started calling it adversarial defenses, where like you want to make the attacker's life miserable, and we're definitely going to be getting into that. Man, these animated backgrounds just, oh well. It's moving. Okay, good. It's got, the presentation has stage fright. But anyway, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time talking about myself other than we do cool things. We're not your normal pen test shop. We do blue team stuff too, and we're available if you want Americans touching things, which I know could be a touchy subject. So our agenda today for the morning, if I can stumble through it correctly, I'm going to be talking quite a lot of smack about the cloud. And so if you have delicate sensibilities and you don't like profanity and you really, really love the cloud, this is your content warning. So we're going to do a big one first. I'm going to teach you how to basically hide on-prem Exchange from the internet, because Windows should not be on the internet, like at all, in any way, shape, or form. I'm going to teach you about how to do centralized logging, how to mess with shells to make them not actually shells, and to do like remote typing indicators for servers, so you can tell who's connected and what they're typing, or if they're typing. And then basically hiding everything from public view and becoming a nuisance for scanners and attackers. And so, how the cloud has ruined us all. So back in something like 2006, Amazon decided, well, we're going to make a bunch of Zen VMs and sell them on the internet. And people said, wow, that's actually a pretty neat idea. And then they bought into it pretty heavily. And they realized that if they started deploying stuff to these Zen VMs, that they didn't have to deal with the hardware issues or the power consumption or the some update stuff, because Linux is Linux, but the hypervisor end of the maintenance component. They didn't have to have their own servers. They didn't have to deal with switching fabric. They didn't have to deal with OSPF or BGP or any of those pesky things that make everything run. And so they just outsourced it to Amazon. And then fast forward 10 years, and now it's essentially internet heroin. Everyone is addicted. Nobody can let go. It is killing everything and everyone. And we're completely dependent, and normal sysadmin skills and security skills are starting to atrophy and degrade because people don't have this equipment to deal with anymore. When was the last time you had to touch BGP? When was the last time you had to do port mirroring? Who even connects to Cisco switches anymore? Like, it's all in the cloud. Who cares, right? And so now we have these years of complacency, and that has bred this like lack of accountability, because people have decided that, oh, the cloud will do all of my security and all of my IT for me. And today, if we fast forward to now, as we're all groggily in here at 9 in the morning, we invent more coping mechanisms than solutions. So using contractual language to deflect accountability and risk is not the same as having a functional security apparatus. You can't just contract away getting hacked. Great, you deflected some lawsuits, but the ones that are coming for you now that you've been hacked are here, and there's nothing you can do about that. And now, also, attackers are going for VPN appliances directly because they're now the soft targets. And in many cases, those VPN appliances are just really, really poorly unmaintained Linux boxes with like a pretty shell on the front. And like this year alone, it's been like what, Ivanti, F5, Fortinet, SonicWall, and as of just Monday, there's articles now saying they're targeting Checkpoint. And so it's ridiculous at this point. It's just going nuts. And so the sentiment that I hold regarding companies doing the absolute bare minimum in every possible circumstance is that in the cloud, you end up with this sort of thing. Huge breaches concerning tens of thousands of users, cameras letting private video feeds leak, 3D printers breaking because they need the cloud, government contractors letting attackers in and leaking all over the place, massive outages and other colorful fireworks. Instead of neglecting you on a onesie-twosie individual basis, with the cloud, you can get neglected en masse. And this is something I have been doing on Mastodon, which apparently has gotten very colorful and interesting. I have more, but I couldn't fit them on one slide. Every time I see a news article where some nonsense happened in the cloud and it caused some sort of catastrophe, I say, go to the cloud, they said. It'll be fine, they said. And some of these things, like this one here, this Google Cloud one is a $125 billion pension fund whose Google Cloud account got deleted by mistake. Oopsie, I deleted $125 billion. How? Like, it hurts the brain. And the rest is like, just as colorful. And so, yeah, all the mistakes except cloud scale, right? And so, in the past, there used to be a perimeter. Most people who deploy into the cloud use the cloud as an excuse to avoid having to do network design and architecture, which is a mistake, because a lot of that was expressly designed to act as a layer of security. And so you're like foregoing that layer of security by letting somebody else worry about it who doesn't care about your security. So in many cases, going to the cloud removes that layer of security, and many people believe that going to the cloud, that they're safer somehow, and this couldn't be further from the truth. Putting machines directly on the internet is never safer than shielding them from the internet. And remember, host-based firewalls, especially Windows, like I'm looking at you, Microsoft, host-based firewalls are operated by the kernel. And so if you think that you're being safe and you're putting the kernel directly on the internet, like that's not going to go well, right? It's not so great for Windows boxes, definitely not so great for unpatched security appliances. So firewalls were designed for a reason, and not using them or networking architecture to protect systems is overtly putting those systems and all your users directly in harm's way. And so, let's begin with explaining how to use security architecture to protect the internet's favorite petri dish, Exchange, from the internet. This is Microsoft's diagram of how Exchange works with its front end and back end and all the ports they're in. It seems pretty straightforward. Most people these days are not directly using POP3 or IMAP4. Most people don't even know what those are anymore because it's just a web browser and you aim it at a website and mail happens. And that's generally as far as the thinking goes. And so when you look at it from like an elder god Linux person like Graybeard, I was around before, Wi-Fi was, like, it's all just HTTPS. It's literally just port 443 that gets you into Exchange, and that's whether you're using the FAT client or using OA, which makes life really easy because everything happening on port 443 means it's simple enough that we can grapple with it in very interesting and colorful ways. And so we can also wrap all of this stuff in something that's also ancient that many people either haven't heard of or never used called mTLS, or mutual TLS. So this is Microsoft's guidance on how to handle networking and firewalls with respect to what ports you need to deal with between the working components of Exchange sort of behind the scenes. They say, if you have firewalls or network devices that could potentially restrict or alter this kind of internal network traffic, you need to configure the rules to allow free and unrestricted communication between these servers. Any. Fantastic. Good job. Thanks, Microsoft. Really? Unrestricted? Glorious. So this creates our favorite scenario, soft on the inside and hard on the outside. And so if you breach a perimeter that has this sort of setup, then this is sort of the attacker's wet dream in that everything is squishy, everything is compromisable because the security layer is just this like little thin outside shell. And once you step past that line of paint on the ground, you can do all sorts of colorful and interesting things. Except now that there's the cloud and these servers are directly connected to the internet, instead of having hard on the outside and soft on the inside, we get soft on the everywhere, trivially exploitable. So people started searching for mTLS, according to Google, back in around January of 2008. It was invented in 1999. And if you've never heard of mTLS, well, actually raise your hand. Show who has heard of mTLS or used it in the past. Wow, okay, so there's going to be some slides here that are boring because I spent some time explaining something that you already all know about. Great, so mTLS. It was formerly called two-way SSL, and the idea is it's client-side certificates. So this concept has been around for something like 15 years, and maybe in America they don't know about it so much, but here it sounds like they do. Do you have to do PKI? Yes. Is it a little extra work? Also yes. But the cool part is that if you the trade-off is that you don't have to have very expensive hardware appliances protecting your sensitive equipment if the attackers can't even talk TCP to the endpoint because they don't have the certificate. Also, there's no licensing or fees or support contracts or anything like that. But like any other good open source technology, it was invented in 1999, and it took about 15 years for people to notice that it existed and start using it in some kind of interesting way. And so, in many cases, budget is a concern, and not many people are insane enough to roll their own firewall. A show of hands, people that ran their own IP table scripts back in the day, and your firewall was a bash script that ran all your IP table stuff. Like, that doesn't exist anymore. It's basically unheard of. There used to be these ninjas that had these, God, what was Smooth Wall, I think, started out as like a Perl script. But despite the fact that they're ancient and almost old enough to buy alcohol, they still work perfectly. And a lot of equipment is actually just IP tables under the hood, and you're just interacting with a GUI that maintains IP tables behind the scenes. And so, fortunately for all of us, Linux has many ways for us to protect assets and not spend $500,000 on expensive firewalling equipment. And this is all done before, I might add, but the cloud has just been essentially a distraction for a decade and a half. So yeah, mTLS was invented in 1999. Right, so you know about 802.1x. I have all these notes that are going to fall on eye rolling, and we already know all of this stuff, folks. So you already know about mTLS, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time describing it. Essentially, the TLDR is we're going to be using certificates to protect an endpoint, and so your users can talk to the things that you want them to talk to because they have the cert, but bad guys who don't have the cert can't even establish a TCP connection. And so the cool part about this architecture design I'm going to present is that you can log them separately. So essentially, we're using HA proxy and Nginx stacked on top of one another to handle the plumbing. So regular SMTP connections so that your mail server can talk to other mail servers can get handled through HA proxy. And so you're not exposing a Microsoft product to the internet, which means you're considerably safer. And so all those connections are terminated at a Linux box. And the thing that they proxy those connections to doesn't even have to be in the same network, doesn't have to be in the same data center. It can be somewhere else in the world. There's some interesting plumbing I'll be talking about later that we can get into that describes where you can move these things about, but essentially it becomes transparent. HA proxy and Nginx both support terminating mTLS. If you'd like, you can choose either however you want to do it. The only real maintenance that you have to do once you set this sort of thing up is rotate the certs every once in a while. And if you make the certs 5 years or 10 years expiration time, then you only have to do that maintenance once every 5 years or 10 years. So it's pretty low barrier if that's the way that you go. And let's see, right. And so this is what I just explained. Yeah, we have to do this all because Windows can't be trusted to touch the internet directly. And now mTLS lives on your endpoints that listen, and it lives on your clients. And if you're using something like GPO or JAMP for any kind of fleet management tool, it's as easy as just pushing that cert out to all of your fleet, and it becomes transparent to your users. You push the other cert to the Linux box and call it a day. And so yeah, what do we PKI search. The trick is mTLS. You guys all know this already. So only machines who have the cert can talk to the proxy, and attackers lose 100% of their enum, scan, and brute capabilities. And so like if you have an environment that's set up in this way, port scans don't work, you know, Census, Shodan, Binary Edge, all those scanners, they won't be able to find anything. Like nothing can talk to that endpoint unless it has the cert. And that's really handy because suddenly now you have a scenario where, now I'm into the demos. You have a scenario where you have limited the number of attackers who can go after you from everybody on the internet to only the people that have the cert, which means there's a lot less parsing logs, a lot less dealing with noise, a lot less incident response, and a lot less liability, which is pretty great. And so now we're going to get into the live demos, and I'm going to turn on mirroring so that I can see what I'm doing. Cool. And now I have shells, right? So first, networking sleight of hand. This is a trick that I learned about 10 years ago. I've been using this historically to hide from the blue team, but it turns out that the same techniques and tools you use to do red team activities and hide from the blue team, you can pass on to the blue team, and the blue team can use these techniques to hide from real attackers. And so I have, let's see. Yeah, this is fun. So if you nmap, oh, I should say that there's an inside joke with this. So I did a poll on Mastodon because being an ex-red teamer, or not even an ex-red teamer, but it's just gone quiet, I have a mountain of these hilarious and silly domain names that I use for when I want the blue team, when I explicitly want the blue team to catch me, and I want them to find me in the logs, I have ridiculous domain names that we set up so that the malware phones home using these ridiculous domain names, so it's very easy to spot. And one of those was Fuckface Academy. And if you go to it, it's literally just a picture, right? But there's a web server. This is HTTPS. It's got a cert. It's a real thing. Like, yeah, there's more information. Let's encrypt. Yeah, so like, yeah, it's a HTTPS website. But if you scan it, you'll see that SSH is closed and AD is closed. Only HTTPS is open. It's the only single port on the box that's listening. But I can SSH to it. Like, here's my shell. How did I get a shell on a box where SSH isn't listening? Well, actually I should get in as root. But it's big enough to read, I hope. Right. So if we look at the config, you can tell HA proxy to look at packets and look at the hex of the packet header. And if the packet header denotes that it is a specific type of protocol, in this case, this is the hex for SSH, it uses the backend client attempts SSH. And client's attempt SSH says use backend SSH, and backend SSH literally just puts it on localhost port 22. And so the SSH daemon on this server is only listening on localhost. The only way into this server is through HA proxy. And so you either have to have this, which means you have to have a key, or you have to, you know, I sadly didn't have enough time to set up a demo with full-blown exchange, but I could have done mTLS the same way. And so there's, you can have HA proxy terminate your mTLS sessions and do that. The hotel Wi-Fi is a little sketchy though, so sadly it's going to do this to me a lot. But yeah, here's me getting a shell because I am piping SSH inside of SSL and pushing that through HA proxy and landing on this machine. And this is not something that you can scan for unless you are intentionally trying to do like, what was the command is, proxy command, OpenSSL S-client. You have to do this to every endpoint running on port 443, which is exhaustive and tiresome from the enumeration side of things. And so like the internet sees a host with one port open, but this one port controls more than one protocol. And so this is a really cool trick. I've been using this for a very long time to hide from the blue teams. And it is quite handy. Let's see. then let's see. So yeah, essentially this is how it works. We're examining per packet bytes of packet headers, and we're distinctively routing protocols on the same port to different places. And the cool part is HA proxy will allow you to log these differently. And so you can say, if the client does try SSH, send it to this log file. If the client does SSL, send it to this other log file. And so it's a lot less work to sort of sift through the noise to separate what you're looking for if you're doing analysis or remediation or anything like that, because you can actually separate the logs into different files. It makes life a lot easier. And this is essentially what's happening under the hood. The diagram is quite simple. We're just using HA proxy to separate things along the way. And so SSH presence detection, this gets pretty interesting. There's a really neat tool that why is it doing that? Discovered recently called iNotify-Wait. Has anybody else discovered iNotify-Wait or used it before? This is, okay. So we run we just finished on Friday, oh my God, a attack surface management platform that has a whole bunch of moving parts under the hood, including a queuing system. And part of what we do there is we're using temp files in several places. And as a troubleshooting metric, iNotify-Wait helped us discover that files were being created and deleted before they were parsed. And there is a trick you can do with iNotify-Wait, where if you aim it at the right places, there it goes. Where did I put it? I'm very much a fan of the College of Up. So in this case, I'm using iNotify-Wait to read the vis home directory and take the output and put it into a loop, which basically says, if files change inside that directory, show me what files they are and give me a timestamp. And so if I then attempt to SSH in as me, you can see stuff happening. And this could be developed out. I ran out of time, but this could be developed out to where, like, if I'm typing, if I do like ls, you can see it's adding lines. And so you can actually have it read the bash history file. And I created an indicator for that, which I can show you. This is another fun trick of this architecture that I've put together, where you can run, for example, a Flask application. Where am I? There we are. Right. So a Flask application running on localhost port 5000. I can then go /doot, and now we have another thing. And so this is a Flask application running on the same server, and now I have SSH, Nginx, a Flash application, all running on the same server, and I'm able to plumb different connections to different places based on, in this case, I have a redirect for the URI. And so if we go look at the config again, this one would be Nginx, I believe. Yeah. And so here you can see like the Nginx config. Here's my /doot location. So it's proxies on top of proxies. And so it's just all sorts of wacky plumbing, and we can send things wherever. And again, this doesn't even have to be in the same environment. It can be on different servers and different data centers, anywhere you want. And so I've been using this trick to hide multiple command and control platforms. So you can have like Metasploit and Sliver and Merlin and Empire and Poopy, and pick your favorite, and you can have, if they're all phoning home on HTTPS, you can have them routed differently based on the URI. And it's the same thing if on the blue team side of things. If you have like /OA, you can have your password reset portal. You can have whatever you want as a web front end for your users hidden behind this kind of plumbing. And it allows you to say, well, take all of the stuff that is for use for my staff and my employees and hide it behind mTLS so that attackers can't even enumerate it, can't even scan it. Because one of the things that we find quite often is things like self-service password reset portals that are publicly accessible, and the company has had their employees in leak data, and passwords and credentials have been exposed. And so you could, in theory, pick up the passwords and credentials from the leak data and just rub them on the password reset portal until you get somebody's account. And then suddenly you're doing attack takeover or account takeovers. And so that gets pretty colorful pretty fast. And this is a pretty clever way to prevent that sort of thing. Let's see, what's next? Syslog collector. So this is really fairly straightforward. Is anybody unfamiliar with syslog and how to configure syslog and sending it the correct? Wow, everybody in here is a syslog expert. I'm impressed. Yeah, and so yeah, I've set up basically, God, what is it doing? So we have this machine, which is, I'm calling it the front end. It's configured to send syslog to another machine. And so it's being sent over an interesting technology called an overlay network. If you're familiar with any solutions like zero tier or zero tier, Tailscale, Nebula, that sort of thing. I'm using Nebula for this because Nebula lets me run my own lighthouse. But if you look at ifconfig, you can see that there's a Nebula interface and it's got a 10 dot address. And this thing, if I can type correctly, has also a 10 dot address. And so I can, oops, I can typo. I can't control C, what? That's kind of wild. Why can't I control C? Okay, sure. Yeah, maybe. Wow, that's wild. I've never had that happen before. That's great. Yeah, okay, so I can talk across the network. And so you can see that if, hey, can I, okay, I give up. This is a pretty quick and easy demo, if I could not screw it up. And so you can see that like here's HA proxy logs flowing from the front end machine. Control Z? Wow, this is wild. I don't even know. Okay. I'll just chalk it up to the hotel Wi-Fi because it's been doing this to me for 2 days. Right, and so simple syslog, essentially, if you can use this sort of technology, as far as like overlay networks go, it'll allow you to, and I guess that would be this slide here, tying everything together with Nebula. So you can use, I'm using Nebula, you can use your choice of networking tool, and it allows you to have the ability to communicate with different hosts without having to put everything in one data center, without having to put everything behind one firewall. You can essentially route these things over the internet sort of haphazardly, however you feel like. Wow, all sorts of stuff is falling apart, isn't it? Nice. How did I do that? Yeah, I broke it proper. I touched the network cable. Right, anyway, right, so the way that it gets interesting is if you route the logs the right way, you can basically collect everything into one central syslog server, and then you can use tools like Solar and Blacklight to emulate sort of Splunk-esque kind of functionality where you can aim tooling at a central log collector and all of your logs are going into the same place. And the only advice I have for that is make sure that all of the timestamps or the time zones all your servers are running are all configured in UTC, because if the time zones are different, then the logs are going to be very difficult to parse because you're going to use essentially the timestamp as your key value. Right, and so fail to ban with that example is you can then aim fail to ban at those logs. And one of the interesting things you can do with Nebula, which again, sadly, I didn't have enough time to do this specific demo, but with this example, you can have SSH and SSL traffic logged to different files, and you can basically say, if there's traffic that's bouncing off the front end because it doesn't meet the mTLS requirement, or they're trying to do directory brute forcing, you can have fail to ban trigger taking that IP address and adding it to a log file, and then just running a reload HA proxy trick. And then you can have HA proxy then send traffic to wherever. You can create another backend in the config that says like, bad guys, and it's a different version of the website, or it's the sort of curl parrot.live trick that I talked about last year. And then so we did the typing together, right? And then okay, when a shell is in the shell, this is a fun one. So I think I mentioned this last year. Why does it keep doing that? So if I SSH in as myself, then I get a shell, right? We would hope. Okay, so I get a shell. But why? Stop. Shut up. Go away. All right, so if I get in as root, and I decide that this doesn't need a shell, this should get something else. Let's say this gets root lol.sh. And if you're going to do that, if you're going to mess with somebody's shell, you have to make sure that you change etc shells and add the thing that you want to use, because that's the only requirement, basically. Also, etc password doesn't like spaces, so you basically just put whatever you want in a bash script and call it a day. And so now, if I try to SSH in with that shell script instead of a shell, I should get permission denied. That's new. Oh, that's right. I put it in a different directory. This should be temp. Thank you. Sorry about that. Typos. Again, thank you everybody for being here at 9 a.m. Demo gods. Nice. So yeah. And so it's a really dumb, easy trick, but if you have SSH scanners hitting you all the time, those things are written with like chewing gum and duct tape and baling wire. They're not meant to cope with something like this. And so if you want to break attackers' infrastructure, let them get SSH in, except make their shell this, because it will just feed them this. Like if you can see the traffic coming in, like this is just spamming, I don't know if it's too small to see, but like it's just spamming 20K a second. Yeah, 20K a second of text via SSH until I control C. Well, SSH scanners don't control C. So this will fill their disk. So like I find that extremely amusing that somebody wants to scan me, I'm taking your disk away. Good luck. Yeah. So right, and so essentially TLDR, self-hosting Exchange is obviously the safer way to run Exchange, despite what the cloud apologists will tell you. Microsoft is overtly making Exchange outside of cloud harder, and for that I'm sympathetic, because they really love those monthly subscriptions. And Linux has a fantastic array of tools and plumbing and things that you can use that will make your life a lot easier if you take advantage of the... God, I did it again. I won't touch it anymore. And yeah. Syslog plus failban equals poor man's adversarial defensive capabilities. And if you can, I would highly encourage you to wrap your entire perimeter in mTLS, because it makes enumeration completely impossible. If you have services that are exposed to partners or partners, channel partners, customers, staff, whoever, and they all have your certificate, great, they're in and they can do their day-to-day business. But attackers, scanners, me, Orbital, we won't see anything. And so be invisible, hide from me, hide from everybody, because less traffic, less incidents, like you'll see something in the news and kind of chuckle, right? And so I would be remiss if I didn't mention this thing that I've probably talked to a bunch of you about that I've been working on for 3 years is finally done after 3 years, and it's ready for signups. And if you want to go play, we built an attack surface management tool. It's all in plain English. It's called Orbital. Go to orbital.phobos.io/signup and sign up if you want. I'll approve your account and you can go play. And with that, thank you so much again. We're into Q&A. Here's my contact information, and I talked quite fast. If anybody has any questions,
exactly.
Please fling them at me.
Yes. Brave sir.
Yeah.
Oh, you got notes. Hold on, man.
Oh, no.
It's getting freaky.
There's pen and paper involved. I'm in trouble now.
There is text on it. Not yet for show, man.
All right, Dan the Magic Man. Sorry, because I am apparently the only one that don't know the mTLS thing. What's the difference between that and regular VPN?
Well, mTLS isn't a VPN. It's not designed to like give you access to another network. It's kind of like a bus pass or like a train ticket. Like you can't ride the train if you don't have a ticket. And so it's more of a access control tool than a network tunneling technology.
Anyone else?
Okay. Any more questions? No? Comments? Anybody want to throw anything? Yeah. I'm American. I'm used to being shouted at. Please.
No one? Okay.
Wow. Okay. Well, then coffee for everybody, I guess.
Thank you so much, Dan.
Cheers. Thank you again. Thank you for having me.